Know Thyself is dedicated to the exploration of the most rewarding task an individual can ever embark on, the journey to find oneself. Our intention is to investigate the universal principles that have equipped our species to seek the treasure of all treasures, self-knowledge. With your host, Daniel Powinski and Eduardo Manteca, this is the Know Thyself podcast. I think we're good, man.
We're good?
Cool.
Game out.
All right. Welcome to the Know Thyself podcast. I'm here with Daniel.
Hello.
I'm Eduardo. And hello to all the listeners. One of the things that we've been discussing in the last probably a few weeks when we're not recording is taking a pause from our agenda within Genesis in this second season. And Daniel and I had this idea where we would sort of have just an open conversation about where we're at thus far with Genesis, with the podcast, and all the lessons that we've covered in the last year and then this year and what's to come, more so, I should say, because of the requests of our listeners, comments through different social media platforms and so forth. People have kind of wanted to know a lot. And I feel like for those who are listening right now, this is an opportunity for us to sort of give you an idea of why we choose the topic, how we choose the topic, and what Daniel and I actually think of the topic and how it can be relatable to each and every one of us. Because every time we finish a podcast, we get just a great amount of comments from individuals, but also questions as to, hey, this is what my experience was. Do you believe that? Is this the beginning or the end for my evolution in consciousness? Or is this something that is going to pass overnight? What do you guys do to prepare yourselves for, a time of suffering? What relatable content do you use? And they're all great questions because, Daniel and I are trying to figure it out ourselves as we go. And one of the things that led us to even the occult, or at least for me personally, was tragedy. I mean, a lot of things have shifted in my life, and there could be much more worse things happening. So I've always been grateful for what has occurred, because nothing that's happened to me as far as something negative has ended up with like an empty outcome. So I always had something where I'm like, oh my gosh, this all happened, but it propelled me into this direction, or it put me on this path. And so today we kind of want to talk about our evolution of consciousness, or our perception on the evolution of consciousness, and how when we formulate these episodes, especially right now with Genesis, it's very personal for us because we want to relate to it as well. It's not like we're just talking about the Bible. An example would be like last week, we were talking about Adam and Eve, and one of the things that kind of came up within the story is when the fall of man happens. And so I think that when we talk about those things, we definitely implement our opinions, and we talk about like how we feel about a story, an esoteric story or an allegory, and how it relates to us. But I mean, that's the reason why they exist, right? Is to help us navigate. And as Daniel said multiple times, this is the story of you. And so I'm not here to kind of declare why we're doing the book of Genesis, but I just think we owe it to you guys to kind of like have this conversation of, why this time that we're doing right now within Genesis is so important, or why we're doing these breakdowns. And so, yeah, I think we'll just kind of take it away from there in an open conversation between Daniel and I and this evolution of consciousness. So yeah, man. So what have you thought in the last like 6-7 episodes that we've discussed before we're recording the book of Genesis? Like, where are you at with all of this so far?
Yeah, man. Great introduction, because I think it's really important to kind of see what discuss the objectives. And this is also something that we really never afforded for ourselves, because we kind of just jumped into the podcast with the first episode being, the 5 W's of occultism. And then from there, we did the esoteric brain, and we had so much information to cover we really never expressed our own personal reasons for one being pulled to this, and over time we've kind of developed it, and that's kind of unfolded like naturally in our conversations, but we've never just had that like, this is us and this is why we're doing this,
Right.
Which is so interesting because this is such a big part of our lives now, and independently we've met so many people through this podcast. A lot of people know why we're doing it and kind of what motivates us, but I think it's always good to kind of see where your relationship is with a subject. It's that kind of that Venus energy that's really, really important to kind of see, and always evaluating your relationship with a subject. And especially when we're talking about esoteric subjects, that your relationship is not just in the mental realm or just in the physical realm, but you're, embedding it deep enough so it can actually touch that like finer spiritual substances, which is where we're really going to kind of see the big growth come from this.
Right.
So, I think especially, and we've kind of gotten off the conversation, not gotten off the conversation, but Genesis has really been our focus. But when we started this season, we were really talking about time and the evolution of time and its connection with the evolution of consciousness. And again, I think this whole study of Genesis is so important because we are in the time of so much stuff ending in our lives, and we're starting to see kind of the finalization of a lot of things that maybe were comfortable for us, or patterns that were always intact that are starting to fade, or even foundations and institutions that are starting not to have their stability like we kind of thought they were and kind of planned for in the future. So we really kind of, in this Kali Yuga, we find ourselves in this twilight of this Kali Yuga. We really can see the fall happening around us, and that's why it's so important to study something like Genesis in this situation, because it is the study of the beginning. And why would you be studying the beginning when you're kind of in this ending? And that's because this is exactly the placement we want to be, because this is where the white magician really kind of operates from, because it's, I guess, the whole theme of the second season is rising during the fall.
Right.
And that's kind of what we're taking on. And that's why we've learned these Hermetic principles. That's what connected us through this podcast. And that's what's connected you to, you might have learned from a different like occult researchers from this podcast. And just think about how much more you know about this subject and how connected you are to this network since this year and a half, since it kind of got started. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that theme of rising during the fall is so important. And this whole time period is about us waking up and coming to the true understanding, like the true wisdom understanding of who we are as creators and how we partake in creation, and we actually infect creation. And that's what I think this whole test is about. It's about, what are you going to do when everything around you, it kind of looks like it's dissolving? And this really gives us this opportunity. If we can kind of study this Genesis, we can kind of connect with what pulled us away from this spot. This is also the journey back into where we need to go. And I just think that this is such an important time to make some drastic spiritual progress in your life, because you have so much resistance in your immediate environment.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And resistance is great. Resistance is Saturn. Saturn makes you stronger, right? So I think we have to realize that whole idea of rising during the fall, every day that we can kind of stay positive, every day that we can kind of tune out the static, tune out all the commotion that's happening in our lives and this world. I think as we kind of can tune that out and kind of really connect to our own spiritual path, we're going to be able to find a comfort. So spirituality compared to like materialism, it's not easier, but there's a comfort that comes in spirituality that's eternal and it's forever. And the comfort that comes with physical materialism is not eternal. It's not forever, right? Either we're going to die before the life of that object, or that object's going to dissolve before our life is over. But either way, time is going to take both of us and that object away, right?
Right.
And so, with Genesis in this story and this journey, and like why we're studying the Bible very much is because, again, we have to remember that this spirituality, especially in this age, in this iron age that we're in, is not going to be easier. But if we're able to create these principles and really instill them in our life and actually live these principles out and actually let them flourish us through us, there'll be a comfort that can't be afforded by any other physical or mental experience. And so I think that's kind of what really pulls us back to the source,
Right.
What pulls us back to the beginning. And one of the movies we're going to be doing either on the Patreon or on the podcast, because it's kind of a simple, quick movie to do, is Tim Burton's Number 9, a movie 9. And if you've heard the number, if you listen to the podcast about numbers, you know the significance of the number 9. But the whole journey of that is to get back to the source. And like, we have to get back to the source. And it's this actually really esoteric, deep movie. And it's a great study of numbers and numerology and everything that we're going to kind of be covering. But, this whole alpha, omega, and getting back to the sources, I think that main motivating factor, and just kind of coming to this whole understanding of, this vehicle and this body is this is the transport for your soul, and this is the carrier of it, and we really have to, be aware of our circumstances, to make sure that we are in the right direction to be making the most possible progress, even in this time of like ultimate spiritual resistance.
That's amazing. Yeah, I like the way you just said that. Ultimate spiritual resistance. And the fact that you just said the resistance is a good thing. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. I mean, when I sit down and I study a lot of anything to do with the mysteries, it's always obvious what compels me to put in more effort into what I'm reading and studying, because I'm at a low. And it's not that I'm at a low in the sense of, my energy's low or I'm emotionally depressed in any way. It's more that there's no denying what's actually occurring. So there's this hunger to understand how it's occurring. Like, to give you an example, like, I think you and I have always been friends because we were able to see past a certain layer. And we validated that from one another without having to say, this is what happened, what do you think? And it's like, well, you're my friend, so I agree. No. There were times where, like, Daniel and I would have, for instance, different experiences with adults. And by adults, I mean, like, we were in, middle school, and for some reason a teacher took it out on us or did something separately, right? Not Daniel and I together, but separately. And that's where I think my journey started, with like wanting to understand the true psychological, I guess, like, where that person has misplaced their energy onto me has to come from somewhere. And these books, especially like in the Bible, that's exactly what they're talking about. So even though Daniel and I are talking with such confidence during these discussions of Genesis, or even of just a lecture from Carl Jung, or from, something that, lies within like Hinduism, or, whatever religion that we bring up, all different perspectives are welcomed in the circle that we are making here with this podcast, because it has to do with the understanding of what's going on underneath. And we talk about that with analogies like the iceberg, but you can pay attention to that and actually get out of the way of a harmful situation by knowing how to forgive and how to put love above anything else. But of course, that's hard to do. And these mysteries and these occult sciences and even, again, the Bible, that's what they're aiming for. They're trying to tell you, like, that the strength will lie within that ignorance, as like George Orwell would say. But you need to know that if you have that understanding, how can you get out of the way of this friction and this actual physical conflict that may occur between you and another person? And so when you and I got to meet, one thing that I was very fascinated with is you would never complain like, oh, this teacher did this to me. You're like, I think this teacher's like ultimately lonely, because I almost felt bad for them. Like, they didn't need to yell at me, but I was like just so happened to be the guy who ran into them at the wrong place at the wrong time. Or you would rise above it by telling me, I saw so-and-so alone at a restaurant and I was with my family. And when I went in to go get, it was like a Saturday, I saw the true teacher who just yelled at me on Thursday, just sitting alone. and it was at the bar of the restaurant, and it kind of changed my perception of them. And then on top of that, something happened where his wallet fell, and I picked it up and handed it to him, and then he turned around and goes, "Whoa, it's you." And I'm like, "No, I know." And then from that day forward, we became best friends. Let's just say that, right? You and this teacher. And it's funny because these experiences, for all those who are listening, I'm sure you've had them where you kind of saw this true side of the person, and you're wondering, well, why can't you be more like this when we're in the classroom? Or why can't you see me as an equal? And then you realize a few more things, like, oh, I guess to be a teacher is difficult. You have more than about 24 students. There are different, and you can relate to this now as a teacher, fast forwarding to the present. But that's where all this starts, and I think that when we read about the Bible, or you get into the Bible, what gets me going or gets me excited when I open those pages, and even if I'm using a book that is breaking down verses in the Bible, the fact that someone took the time to do this makes me feel more comforted. And you just said all this. You said this long-term comfort you're going to get that materialistic wealth won't ever give you, which is finding out that there was an emptiness that needed to be filled, but it needed to be filled with something of substance. And that substance is what we're talking about on this podcast. And the Bible in itself, or Genesis, is taking you through those steps as well as like the Kabbalah or the Kabbalion, and like what we've done with the three initiates and like principles that we talked about. They're all kind of giving you this deeper understanding that you're right. That teacher that you want to sort of like dismiss, or this adult that doesn't want to see with you eye to eye, is going through something that is an actual emotional despair in their life, which might be they don't get to see their child as often as they would because of some, political reason or another, or the relationship with the mother didn't work out. So this guy's actively hurting, and a place that he has to be in Monday through Friday is this school, and you're one of the many little things that get in the way. But you are not a little thing, you're a person. So you feel that injustice, but you feel like you can't stand up for yourself because you are much, much younger than this elder person that's going through this. And I feel like had we had this moral, an understanding of like these moral principles, you would learn how to forgive and forget and never be feeling as upset, even if someone does make you feel smaller, because you're like, oh, if you're going to pick on a kid, then something's up with you. And that's kind of where you kind of start to win these victories. And I think that's all I've ever wanted for this podcast, is not to just be someone on the other side of a microphone talking about my opinions on the occult, but to give you hope that what led me to these subjects and what makes me want to study this and sit here with Daniel is that I'm not done yet. And I keep running into these fictional teachers that I'm talking about. And these studies are what makes me gain more hope. And does that make sense in perspective,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. No, I think you bring up a great point for, and I like how this kind of discussion's kind of unfolding, because really what we're seeing in Genesis is causality. And this is the cause. This is where all of our emotions, this is where all of our experience kind of pours out from, and especially our desires. So if we want to gain any kind of control on that, that is going to be addressed and remedied in this area of life,
right?
And you talk about, not maybe lashing out against a teacher who is maybe treating you, immature, like, not treating you correctly. I think you bring out a really, really good point, because what that showed, if that was something you were able to do as a child, is that you saw that this pain that is being expressed by this individual has a different causality than the zeitgeist moment you're in.
Right.
For this pain to be pouring out of this individual means that they're so full of pain that they can't even contain it anymore, and now it's pouring out on the energy around them. And that's as a child, especially at that teenage age, I think that's very powerful. I think as an early child, you can probably perceive that. And then I think once you get past that seventh birthday, probably all the way up till you're 18, like you still have empathy, but you're so busy with your own world because everything's changing so much. It's hard to, I think, sometimes tap into, especially like an adult's empathy. You might be able to empathize with somebody your own age a little bit more, but it might be like hard to like look at somebody and be like, oh, actually, they might be mad because maybe they're lonely.
Right,
You know what I
right.
mean?
Yeah,
Where
yeah,
like
yeah.
you can kind of perceive that it's kind of the one, it was a blessing and a curse when I owned their own restaurants and I was like bartending them. It would be a blessing and a curse. Like you would like meet somebody who, they're just, you don't see a wedding ring, and that doesn't mean anything, but you kind of feel bad, but this person's lonely, but then you were glad that you were there, so maybe they didn't have a lonely night that night. And who knows, maybe they like being alone. There's so many factors kind of being there, but you have a little bit of more empathy for you because you can kind of like, you can kind of get feeling to that. So, I think the idea of Genesis really showing the causality and that desire drive and kind of where everything kind of comes from, not only beneficial for your own experience and your own spiritual growth, but also for your understanding of others.
Right.
And where that gets so important, and I'm not trying to be selfish for yourself, but you understanding others, one of the biggest aspects of you understanding others is your ability to forgive others.
Right.
Right. And that doesn't mean you forgive somebody. I know we spoke about this. It doesn't mean you forgive somebody and you have to become best friends with them again. Like you can forgive somebody and not ever be a friend with them again. And
Right.
that's totally appropriate. Right. That's actually probably not a bad idea in some situations, but there's that aspect of forgiveness. And how deep that is in kind of our own, spiritual development. So, the alchemist, the substance that the alchemist experiments with is experiences,
Right.
and that's really what we were kind of looking at with this whole kind of case study of today with, kind of comparing Genesis to our lives. But again, those stories are biblical. And they're so deep because these are, again, it's that story of you, which we've always kind of said, but such an important aspect to kind of think about. But I think just how everything, when we're kind of reading, especially this Old Testament, and we're really seeing this causality of this spiritual context, and even just a justification to why this human experience can be so difficult. We talk about
Right.
like Saturn and we talk about it, but at the end of the day, Saturn's only put in place so you go through these experiences, so you develop, because again, its consciousness is evolving through you. And I think that's such a powerful thing that we have to remember. And we kind of talk about this on the Patreon a lot because there's knowing and then there's wisdom where you actually are applying that knowing. So knowledge and wisdom kind of separate from that. And I know this isn't like the true etymology, like the breakdown etymology of it, but it's kind of how Mark Passio broke it down. And I really liked it because it simplifies this idea between knowledge and wisdom. So knowledge is knowing something and wisdom is acting upon that knowledge of knowing something.
Right.
Okay, so you can know the right thing, but you might not do the right thing. And that's one of our biggest spiritual battles in the situation we're in, right? So many people go to church on Sunday and then on Monday they're foreclosing on somebody's house, right? But they've separated. It's like, I went to church on Sunday, so it's fine. I can do whatever I need to do Monday through Saturday. We know what to do, but we don't actually do that. And I think that's that transformation from knowledge to wisdom when you actually put that knowledge into action and you actually utilize that correctly. And that's when we're actually making spiritual progress rather than lying to ourselves about our spiritual progress or creating these like almost like fake progress, I want to say, where you're just like, oh no, I'm doing spiritual progress because I went to yoga and I meditated. Right. But then like when I really think about it, I'm like, yeah, I went to yoga and meditated, but like not at one point was I was thinking about these other things. I was, maybe I was really negative. Maybe I wasn't, there was just like other stuff was getting in the way and I was kind of interfering with it. So,
well, I like that everything you're saying is leading up to what we're going to start talking about with the remainder of the Bible. Because when we start going into the story of Abraham, that's when you start to see allegorical applications within like that journey of that family's lineage and like what's going on. But you wouldn't start there. You have to start with everything that we're talking about right now that's underneath the surface, right? So what we're learning right now underneath the surface is like the 7 days of creation, how God sees the world and how the image of God and how it's the image of God that's bestowed upon us, and for us to find out that we are God and we are him and he is us, and it is us and we are all in one. You get to learn that, and it's like, wow, this is amazing information, which is very interesting because it's kind of like the timeline of anything we've done in the podcast. It's like, here's these like amazing principles, like, can you believe this? And it's like, can you open up your third eye and see this cosmic reaction that's going on above and then the below? And then it comes to the application. And I feel like within the verses of the Bible, we'll start finding out that, okay, at some point we're going to stop with these sort of like higher than us understanding of the causality above us, and we're going to bring it to the microcosm and see how it's being applied along the way. And you see some dark things, right? You get to find out about who's betrayed who kills who over jealousy, what God does to humanity with the flooding. And you find all these things out. And again, if you take this all in at once, you're just like, man, this book is very intense. It's very righteous. There's like this information that you're giving me that's making me feel that warmth inside that we talked about, when you're learning about the mysteries, and you can take it with you eternally. But there's also this test period that you're going to have to go through where it's like, can you apply this? And can you really take this wisdom and make it work for when it needs to be worked? And that's what's going to be, in the story with Abraham and everything else. It's just kind of like, hey, here's these direct connections to God. But I remember as a kid, I would learn about conversations that individuals in the Bible had with God. I'm like, man, if you were talking to God, then how can you go and screw anything up? Like,
right.
That's crazy powerful. Like, he was talking to you and you were like, I'm going to go this way. And it's like, I would have been, pretty terrified and probably very subservient to God, because I'd have been like, oh, wow, you're right there. But obviously, like, that's not what they're really trying to say. It's just that they're saying that even if you have this idea, which are these principles we were bringing up in these podcasts and these 2 seasons, what are we going to do and how are we going to do it? And I find it fascinating because I'm not testing anyone. I'm just talking to you about my opinion on various schools of mystery and things that I hope will aid me in the time when I run out of that source and I'm really being put to the test. Mm-hmm. It's like, where can I reach down into? What pocket is available that has this reminder that, like, hey, this physically feels difficult. This person is causing an issue within my life or my circle of friends and family. How do I navigate and how do I separate? By saying, like, simple things like, right, I know people have heard this before, but like, hurt people, that helped me out for a very long time when I used to try to question, why is that person being so negative? Like, life is so short. Don't you know how short it is? Don't you know how eternity works? You never die physically. We're always like, we're in this world in between, like, above and below and but it wouldn't matter because that person who is irate in that moment, I want to fix them. And the problem was, it wasn't so much I needed to fix them, but get out of the way of something that they're going to have to figure out on their own. And so anyways, kind of went on a tangent there, but I just feel like that's what keeps me going back to even finding more and more information that I wasn't even looking for within these chapters of the Bible, or like even the 7 steps of alchemy that we covered. It's just kind of like, wow, I thought it was over and it's just getting started. And you're like, man, yeah, no,
I love that. And I love how you brought up the aspect of like Abraham, and then we'll talk about Noah talking to God, and how as a child, you're so blown away how this person has a direct conversation with God and then goes and kind of violates it. Right. And then you think about us, and here we are talking to God every day. And on every day we violate natural law. So we are in this direct communication with God, right? Depends if we're listening. Depends if we're sensitive enough. It depends if we're not busy enough, because you kind of have to be calm for it. Even though it's always there. That energy is always there. It's always that inner voice. So we are the character having the direct conversation with God, who then turns around and goes and violates the natural law, right? We violate the law. We either take somebody's property. We do something that opposes some kind of negative energy to a living organism, right? Mm-hmm. We violate their natural law. And, you read this Bible and you're like, how could do this? Like, how could Cain do this to Abel? Right. And because this is what we're seeing now, because you're right. We were we were in the root of the 7 steps of creation, and you kind of see these like natural emanations of our desires and our drives, right? And so we're making it way from this plane of causality, and it's making its way down to what you were saying is the plane of effects.
Right.
And that's what we're going to start seeing play out. And that's why these different families that are going to branch off of Abraham are going to live, like these individuals are going to live for a certain amount of years, and they were married for a certain amount of years, because we're going to see the emanation of all these numbers and all these principles kind of starting to blossom. We're kind of seeing it, and the evolution of consciousness is kind of happening. So, we're kind of approaching this aspect of, the desires of these humans and how these desires play out, but it is so fascinating because you read these stories and you're just like, oh, he was talking directly with God and then went against him.
Mm-hmm.
You do that every day.
Yeah.
You do that every day. You do that the moment you get into your car and somebody cuts you off and you start, slamming your steering wheel because you're upset. Like, there's nothing in this universe, if we want to honor God, and there's a reason why he spoke about this in Genesis. It was just like, and God looked upon the land and it was good, and he saw it as good, because everything that comes from God is good. Okay, if it's not good, it's because our perspective isn't correct, because we're not seeing how this is. It might be a negative thing that happens in our life, and we might perceive it as a negative thing, but everything that comes from God is evolution.
Right.
It's progressing further down this line, that we call physical evolution, but we know is more of a spiritual aspect. But there's nothing bad that comes out of God. It's the inversion of God that is what's going to do this. It's us turning our backs on it or not connecting. When I speak to God too, I'm not saying it's like the man in the clouds, but this is that deep inner voice. This is that some of our intuitions is a little bit louder, but all of us can kind of get connected to what is true and what is right, Now, through calcination, we can kind of further make those blocks, and that's why doing something like the alchemical process is such a great way to kind of break down some of those calcinized blocks, right? But we always have to think about that, because again, we look at the story and we're like, oh, I can't believe Peter denies Jesus. Like when they question Peter, he's going to say, oh, I don't know who Jesus is.
Right.
And you're like, how would he do that? And it's like, well, what the fuck would you have done?
Exactly.
Like right now, like, what would you have done? Are you man enough? Are you going to actually stand? Like, are you not a man enough? Are you a sovereign individual enough? Right. Are you going to be able to take this responsibility of changing the patterns of your life? That's a little hard. God's asking me to, I have to shift these patterns. So I'm not going to do it. So I'm going to go against it. But then we look at these stories and we're like, tisk, tisk, how would they do that?
Yeah.
And this is why Jesus is like, okay, who's ever free of sin, launch a stone.
Right.
And nobody could pick up a stone, because he's just like, just what I thought. You know what I mean? And we're getting the early aspects of the story. And that's what's really going to be nice about when we kind of get into like the story of Jesus, and even like the stories of like the Prophet Muhammad and all the kind of different prophets, how they come around and they just so beautifully express this understanding of natural law and this accordance to natural law.
Right.
And so, again, Genesis can kind of get heavy, and sometimes we'll be like, wow, like we're talking about the end so much, but like we're going to get to a spot where we're going to be kind of talking about these power players that, wear the universe like a beautiful garment, and it wears on them perfectly. And that's that, that white gown that we're all trying to get through, that whole the golden pajamas of the emperor, right? That's what those stories are about, and just kind of how important it is. But yeah, we're approaching some really great stuff, but we have to be able to really start to flex that imagination and that creative impulse to really start to, fully accept, with that knowledge and that wisdom, fully accept that this is the story of you. Not just like, oh, this is the story of me, and somebody else, another esoteric person comes up and you shake your head and you're like, yeah, the Bible's about us, huh? And it's like, yeah, crazy. But like, you're just verbally saying, you're not actually, and I'm not even at this point, and I'm like working every day to get there, but to fully instill this understanding. And you're never going to be able to fully understand how much this story is you. So you just want to get a little bit more each day, and that's how you kind of build upon it. But you'll never be able to fully grasp how much this is your story.
Correct.
So it's just such a beautiful becoming process. And it's the beauty of becoming. It's the beauty of accepting that there is natural law and that you do have to align yourself to these principles. And when you align yourself to these principles, you have growth. When you unalign yourself from these principles, you have pain, right? There's a beautiful becoming in why we become more ethnically aware, why we have ethics, why we have morals, right? There's this beautiful aspect of all that spiritual growth that kind of comes in that beauty of becoming. But at no point is this journey supposed to be easy. And at no point is this journey going to be without its challenges, because really, as you kind of go up, you're faced with even more challenges.
Correct.
Right. But you get this thick skin by, reading the Bible, experiencing the Bible, reading the Vedas. You anytime you read one of these and you actually instill this knowledge in you and understand that this knowledge is in you, you do get thicker skin. You get a shield. You get bigger things. So as you approach these bigger challenges and maybe this cleansing of your karma, or maybe your family's karma, or maybe even your culture, or your, the karma of your race, because that could be a big thing too. Like the karma of your tribe, right? As you kind of make this progression and you take on these things, it's going to be bigger challenges.
Right.
So you need those shields. You need all that protection you possibly can. And that protection is just that eternal warmth and comfort that comes with truly understanding that we are the light that shines through, rather than just the collection of skin and bones.
Right.
Right. But it's easier said than done. And that's where I think that phrase comes from, because in spirituality, everything's easier said than done. It's super easy to say that you smudge your house. Super easy to say that you're into crystals. It's super easy to say you go to yoga, right? It's a lot harder to actually smudge your house and make a spiritual experience out of it, and actually start from, open the doors, go from the whole place, push the energy out, clean it with like sweetgrass, do the whole aspect. It's much easier just to be like, oh, I burnt the sage and I just kind of ran around my house. I got the crystal, but I just put it on my desk. I don't charge it. I never take it out into the sun. I don't really meditate with it, but it's there. So I know it's helping me. But it's like it could be, but there's so much more you could be doing here. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And we get comfortable, and it's just like, we get comfortable with like, oh yeah, I go to yoga, but like, it might not be like a spiritually driven yoga class. It could be like one of those mind body classes where it's all about, mental strength and physical strength, which is great. You gotta keep both of those in charge, but like, don't think you're getting like spiritual development. No, that can't be really, because you can do spiritual development in any situation, but like,
no, you're spot on.
Okay. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Dude, I don't know if you've ever heard this story, but, oh man,
tell me.
It was such an interesting moment. So I was on my way to yoga. I like to do hot yoga for a lot of reasons, and physically speaking, with my back, regards to my back, it's just always been something I do. And so it's become a part of my life, almost like a routine, because I go weekly. So there's the issue right there, right? So the issue being that it's become a part of me, but as far as like the actual understanding of what I should, approach it with, gets lost in between, the drive time there. Okay. So it's like 20 minutes away. Then it's like, oh, I better get a spot, we're forever kindergartners. And that's something I always been observant about, is that you're just like, even if you're in a room full of adults, everyone's like, that's the spot I want. And this is that. And you can feel that. We just do it a little bit differently, where we're kind of like, oh, you were going to sit there. It's like, yeah, that's a good spot. And I'm like, yeah, I know, that's why I'm here. And then you're like, what is happening right now? But I digress. So the point being is that I've seen how it's shifted for me in regards to it becoming a daily routine. But this is the point of discipline here and understanding of what's really going on. So I'm on my way there, and I got here in Phoenix, the drivers are very aggressive. We have very, 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 very ample and very wide and ample freeways, and you can pretty much get anywhere in Phoenix in about 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. So miles pretty much equate to time here. It's like 30 miles, 30 minutes. So it makes for like a free for all on the freeway, and it can really like spike your sympathetic system up and so forth. And so anyways, one day I'm on my way to yoga. Traffic is pretty bad. People are kind of cutting each other off, all this stuff. But I'm in my own world going like, hey, this is my time to break away from the world, from my 2 jobs, from this, from that. Here I am. But I'm already kind of in a ticked off mood. So I'm like, I just need to get to yoga. And my teeth are sort of like, they're clenched, I'm like, I just need to get there. I just need to get there. And I said to myself, this is terrible. Like I did this to myself. I said to myself, man, if someone else just like cuts me off or like gives me the finger or does something like that, like I'm just going to lose it right now. Like I just enough is enough. Just leave me alone. So I get to the stoplight and the light's not changing. And normally this light that I'm at always changes. Like it's one of those lights where like as a car rolls up, it turns green because it's like not a lot of people are coming. And for some reason it's red. And the car pulls up next to me. And so my gaze is looking, past my steering wheel, out the windshield, not looking left or right. But in my peripheral to my right, I can see that there's someone next to me that's looking at me. And I was like, man, I bet I wasn't in the right lane. Did I not use a blinker? I'm like, I'm just not going to succumb to your energy. And I started having this own conversation with myself. I said like, man, if this person if they say one thing to me right now, like I don't even know what I'm going to do. Like, I don't know if I'm going to roll my window down and just tell them off. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I didn't like how I was feeling. I was like, man, I can't believe I'm about to walk into a class right now and it's quiet and all this. And like this knot is in the center of my heart right now, behind my sternum, above my heart. There's just energy. And I just literally felt something come over me, say, just look. And I turn over and there is this probably man, I want to say in his like mid 40s, balding, kind of has like childlike cheeks, like they're kind of plumpy. And he smiles at me and then waves and goes, hello. Like just says hello. I can't hear him, but he goes, hello. And I look at him and I smile back and I go, hey. And like as the light turns green and I turn left, I almost started to just sob because I was just like, the release of energy just kind of came out. And I was like, where was I going? What was I doing? And who was that man?
Sounds like an angel.
And so the bottom line of that story is that it wasn't the class that did anything for me as much as it was 2 things happening there. One is I was the cause of my own demise, and I also was resisting, a side of humanity that can be good, because I was holding on to the side of humanity that showed me its negative side. And I think that these stories that you'll learn in Genesis or in the Bible just lie within this one story. I mean, obviously the automobile isn't in the stories and all this stuff, but this is something I want people to focus on right now as I say this, is that one of the things that has become an issue with anything in the mysteries is that there's something that we've created, which is, and we talked about this in the beginning of the podcast, which is the illusion of time. So the issue with the illusion of time is when you make time compartmentalized into something like, say, the category of history, right? History being in the past, then you feel like that's what they were doing, but they don't understand what I'm doing right now. Like what Jesus did then, good for him, but like, where is he now? And, petroleum is ruling the world and gas prices have affected me emotionally because the prices change. I didn't ask for gas to be the main source of energy that we use, or fossil fuel. And like, look what's happening to climate. Before you know it, you get so lost in it that you can dismiss a lot of the mysteries, when in fact, when you're feeling the burn the most is when you should look into these stories and go, oh my God, this is the same thing. This is the same thing. Different time periods, I guess, if that's how you want to like look at it, but it's the same thing. And I think oftentimes even people who are devoted, say Catholics or Christians or whatever religion you're in, it's categorized in that's the past. I'm learning about the past so I can be a better person in the present, but it's still in the past. So it's like slightly not real. It's kind of like if you had moral guidance through comic books, but you're like, oh, but those guys are superheroes. And Gotham isn't a real city. It's something that Batman lives in. So therefore, not so relevant. And it's like, you're almost doing that on purpose. Like if you want to, you could bring relevance to this and understand what the allegory is here in this superhero story. And I find that that happens a lot when people are trying to justify why they're not spiritually involved, is that they're like, I don't need a book that was written many years ago by the hands of man, or had its like way with the hands of man and all the horrible things that the Catholic Church has done to give me moral guidance. But if you don't have any kind of map, which is what we're talking about in Genesis, is just this map of the story of you, then you are now a victim, or will fall to being a victim of the structure made by man in the present. And that's where there's the biggest lie. The biggest lie is that there's the natural law that you're talking about. And there's a beauty in that natural law. And you see it when, you spent a night outside under the stars or watched the sunrise by yourself, and you realize, like, okay, this is something else. This is not made by me, nor is it made by like my fellow brothers and sisters. But man, I wish they were all standing here with me so they could witness this. Maybe we'd all get along a little bit better. And it all sounds very like hunky-dory when I say it like that. But what I'm saying is, like, the day-to-day life that we live in right now has been created by us right now, not by natural law. And so for those of us who are having a tough time, this is where I urge you to not just take some time to read about these stories, but also make them applicable, so that next time I look to my left or right, I know that I'm smiling, you're smiling, we're smiling, and no one can take that away from us. You know what I mean? And I think that that's what the journey we're going to start falling into with the story of Abraham, is that these relatable allegories or relatable periods that happen that are hard to also even take in, like the story of Noah, the story of Abraham, the story of all the betrayal that goes on in the Bible. But it's so that you can understand, like, the betrayal will continue happening because it's part of what's inside of you that you need to have an understanding of to know how to navigate when it does rise or when something feels unfair. I mean, it's the same reason why I think it's important to just have a conversation with your significant other, or even your friend or your mother or father, when there's some kind of unfairness. Well, to have a conversation might open up the floor to what's really going on underneath, but we never get there because it's always like, you did this to me, therefore I'm going to do something to you back. So we're even Steven, but no one ends up being even. If both of us only have one eye and the story is an eye for an eye, then we're both now blind. So it's like, okay, now we're just running into each other,
right?
And yeah, so that's kind of like where I come from whenever I sit down with Daniel and we go into the next verse or the next book or the next relatable topic, is that these are just based in my opinion of trying to get through suffering and trying to get through trying to get through the idea of where we might have gone wrong and bring it back to square one again. And I feel like natural law shows you, like, this is square one, start from here and then go that way.
Right.
And yeah, man.
Yeah.
That's pretty much all I got to say.
No, I love that. That was fantastic, man. Thank you so much for, I mean, one, not only the great story that kind of applied it, but just kind of pulling it all together so we can kind of see where those natural law expressions make themselves apparent and how they, it's one of those things, it could be so predictable, cause and effect of, what comes in and what kind of comes out, and we could kind of look at everything. And then it shows just like how limited our past experiences and our current perspective has to sometimes not the beauty of the situation expressing, because you almost didn't look over to see the guy who just wanted to say hello to you. You know what I mean? Like, you almost just stayed there. You would have stayed frantic, right? And then you would have pulled into that yoga hot-headed, and then you're going to go sit in a hot yoga room. Like, that's going to be terrible. You're just going to like cook yourself in there, right? So yeah, no, I think that's fantastic, man. And I think it's again, how do we guide ourselves through this situation and through this experience, and why not use the oldest information in the world? Because nothing, when it comes to desires and human needs, has really changed. Like, we like entertainment, and like, oh, they didn't have computers back then, but they had entertainment. They had all this kind of things. They have the same kind of distractions as we do today, just in simple kind of different kind of forms. But
well, esoterically, just to interrupt, esoterically, what's happening right now, which is kind of interesting, is podcasts. Podcasts have become the source of people trusting people. So at first people will tell you, they're like, I don't know, I got onto this podcast and people feel like they have to defend themselves a little bit. They're like, I mean, I've never been a fan of this guy, or I didn't know this guy's movies, but like one day I started listening to it, and the conversation that he was having with another individual just seemed so like compelling, that there was this vulnerability that I've felt, and I felt like he was expressing it, and it gave me a little more hope and humanity. Because if I don't have it in a raw form, like a podcast or a conversation like this one right here, then I'm just subjected to opening or to looking into, say, the news, which sucks, or, pop culture, which isn't really controlled by us. Sometimes there are golden eggs in pop culture and movies that we're going to continue talking about on this podcast. But for the most part, it's kind of like, this is how it is. This is what violence is. If this guy didn't do this to you, would you not avenge your family? And you're like, I would avenge my family. Yeah. And it's like, dude, the fact that someone else is putting these ideas in your head is terrifying. And I think that what you were going for, and I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was going to say, that was like the other thing I was going to bring up, is that like we're seeing that with podcasts right now across the board, or even like cooking shows. It's so funny how cooking shows became a huge thing. And it's not so much like the aesthetics, or, it's the fact that we all have to, feed ourselves and have that nourishment. But it's interesting when you see someone who does it with love, because you're like, I know what that tastes like. And so you're just watching someone who enjoys like making like their favorite macaroni and cheese, and it might be only like 4 ingredients, but you're like, oh, this is a solid 20 minutes I could watch, because this person's doing this with something, I don't know what it's called, but I think they call it love. And again, back to these mysteries, or the schools that we talk about, or why we even dive into this, is just to give you an idea, like it is real, and it is falling into this natural law, but yeah, sorry, you were going to say, I'm so sorry.
Oh no, that was it, man. That was perfect. That was a perfect way to look at it, and it's always just so important to, remember that there is this guiding aspect when it comes to, nature always is balanced. It's never out of balance. And if it's out of balance, it puts itself into check. And to see ourselves as a part of nature, but then get mad when nature puts us into check when we're out of balance, is very hypocritical. So I think as we kind of approach this, and as we really see, we are made from the clay of this earth, and this whole physical experience is meant for the evolution of our consciousness, we can really start to view this like that alchemist that we spoke about, that, views every situation like,
right,
what is the effect on my soul? And again, if winning a bunch of money could have a negative effect on the soul if you get greedy and, negative to people, right? Because you don't trust anybody, because you think everybody's coming for your money, and it changes your personality. Where it doesn't matter how much money you made, and you never had to work again, it tainted your soul. So the alchemist would have saw that as a negative experience, So I think just kind of, adapting that and approaching that as a goal and trying to get there closer each and every day is the best thing we possibly can. And then honestly, just be honest with ourselves. Some days we're going to have much more progress, and some days we're not. But we don't need to, create a trophy on the days we make a lot of growth, and we don't need to punish ourselves on the day we don't.
Oh, that's well said, man.
Because that's so important, because there's a lot of times you see people who are like, oh, I did this and I got really into shape, and they got like so excited about it that they almost like psych themselves out, and then they like stop working out or something like that. Like, oh, I was so good last week. This week I'll just get into some shenanigans, and then you get back into negative cycles and negative patterns again. So, yeah, man, I love the idea as the second season, rising during the fall,
during the fall.
And I think that that's such an important, good connection, because it kind of connects with that first theme of the first season, which was the sky's not falling, we are rising. But this, I think, almost takes it to a second level, because we're not only talking about like the fall of the Kali Yuga, but also our initial fall that we all went through. So it kind of connects everything to it. So I think it's a great kind of mantra to kind of repeat to ourselves, and kind of make it, a great point when you're feeling bad, when you're feeling anything, when you feel the resistance of Saturn, when you feel anything that's, you think going to impede your progress. I think that's a great little mantra to remember.
I agree, man. I agree. And so, I know that we finished with Adam and Eve last week. And this week, I know, again, we're here to explain what the trajectory looks like, why it looks the way it does, and who we are involved in all this as far as our perception of the Bible and what we're learning along the way, and we are learning a lot. And then Daniel again and I discussed this, but for the next few episodes, we'll continue on Genesis with this new perspective, I guess, that you can see that, like, hey, we're right there with you. Like, we don't have all the answers. We're not trying to say, hey, this is what the Bible is and this is what the Bible is not. It's just another book, another source that is helping us figure out who we are and why we are the way we are, and what that outcome looks like if we're not careful by not taking some of these like hints that are given to us in the time we find ourselves in.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, and I think we're going to continue trying to answer those three questions of who we are, why are we here, and where are we going?
Right.
And those are, again, lifelong questions that we never expect to have a full answer to, but we can get closer and closer on our journey. So who we are, why we are here, and where we are going, we're going to kind of keep continuing to try to approach that with Genesis and any other resources that come along our way, which is always so exciting.
Awesome, man. We have some exciting things still going on. Daniel is on fire right now with the Patreon account. So those Patreon members who get to see the breakdowns that he's doing right now with regards to the zodiac and the houses, it's fantastic, because eventually when Daniel's done, we'd like to make sure that that there's more to that than just his breakdown on the Patreon account, because a lot of people will ask us for advice, which is super. I mean, it's so nice and so kind that you think that we have something to say that may or may not help you with. And, all we can do is support one another and also find a way to give you more resources that may or may not put you in the direction that you intended to be on, or maybe should be on. I don't think you should be on anything. It's just up to you what you do. But Daniel, eventually what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and have Daniel do these consultations. And I'm excited because he's helped me out with these. And again, there's just questions. There are questions that I ask him. I'm like, hey, this is my birth chart. This is, how I came to be in my first breath. And like, what does this complex system have to say about that?
Right.
And he's never given me an answer that's like, well, this is what you are, and it says here you love blueberries. I'm like, I do love blueberries.
Right.
It's not so specific to that as much as it is more of a internal guidance that may or may not help you get out of your own way. And that's what I always need help with, in my opinion, is that I have all this knowledge. How do I apply it? And then during the application, how is it applied properly? Okay, so it's a lot of steps in order to have an outcome that doesn't harm you.
Right.
And I feel like someone like you will do a great job at giving, some pointers on how to do that specifically. So look out for that, because we're going to have a whole thing set up with that, and as well as the raffle, which I'm excited for. We're going to have a raffle. We're going to do it live on Instagram.
Yeah, it's going to be so much fun. We're going to have a ball.
So, yeah, it's going to be great.
We'll have all your fancy clothes from the wedding.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm wondering if maybe that would be something to do at the Lake Tahoe house.
Oh, that'd be great, man.
On a couple days after the wedding.
I will have my equipment, so.
You will?
Yeah.
So maybe we can get this set up. So that would be really fun, because we would already have fancy clothes. We could probably, and we could make it look like we're way above our tax bracket. So that would be fun. But yeah, two exciting things. So the alchemical counseling, and I should really say it's more like alchemical camp counselor. So what it's going to be really more of like, hey, I've been in these woods before. I don't know what's going to happen when we go into the woods together. There might be bears, there might be squirrels. Like, I'm here for you, but I'm just more of like a Virgil on the journey.
Yeah.
So it's more of like, hey, this is your journey. And so what we would be kind of looking at there is, first initial thing will be like a consultation where we'll look at your birth chart, we'll look at your numerology, we'll kind of talk about where you are and kind of what your goals are for, what kind of spiritual development do you want to do, and then what we're going to do is kind of go through the 7 steps of alchemy together. So we're going to have, it'll be like one-on-one sessions. Well, we'll chat, we'll kind of talk about what this stage kind of means. There'll be like kind of assignments to do, like journal entries, kind of art projects. activities outside, just like a whole mind, body, soul kind of whole situation. And the idea being like we almost like set this up, and when you're ready for the next one, we just kind of set it up, and it kind of just flows into the other. So I'm really excited about what I call the alchemical camp counseling, because I would love to kind of connect with you guys. You always have some great one-on-one questions, but also if you are, say there's a certain subject that you're just really interested in, or you have a bunch of questions, because we've had so many people who've been like, hey, if I have a bunch of questions for you, but I don't expect you just to answer them. Like, can I pay to reserve time so I can ask these questions? And it's just like, of course you can. Like, that's super beneficial. I know, like, if I could do that for Mark Passio, I would do that once a week.
Right.
Like, I would call him up. Like, if I could talk to Jordan Peterson, offered any of those things, like any of these people
Absolutely.
that we listen to, like, if I had a Ouija board and I believed in Ouija, like I did Ouija boards, I'd be asking young questions all day long.
Yeah.
Like Manly P. Hall would block me on the Ouija because he'd be like, just leave me alone. I'm like, Manly, please, just one more question. And he'd be like, no, I'm not going to answer that. So yeah, there's that opportunity there. So it's going to be kind of a whole different kind of setup. So we have that alchemical camp counseling, I'll call it. And that'll be, you could access that through the website. And for the first month, once that goes live, there'll be like an introductory price, and you'll lock in at that price for all the steps. So
Cool.
if it's like, I think it's going to be patron, it's going to be like $50 an hour. And that locks in. And the cool thing is if you make it to the 7th step, that whole conversation and that whole session is free, and you get to nominate somebody for free for a consultation. So say that was beneficial, say going through that process and having somebody who can kind of just help, ask more questions and check on how your alchemical process is going. If it's beneficial, you can kind of pass it on to a friend who you think might be better, or a family member who you think might benefit from it. And then they get to do a consultation. And if they like it, we start the rodeo again, and then they make it through and they find a friend. And before we know it, we know everybody in the world.
That's right.
Right?
That's awesome. We're just making more room for everybody.
Just making more room for everybody. And then the raffle, though, that's going to be really exciting. So the raffle is going to be, we have to figure out exactly how much like the raffle ticket will be. I believe it's going to be 5 or 10, depending on if shipping and handling is going to be included. But I have a bunch of books that I can't take to Costa Rica. So we're going to kind of raffle off books. I'm raffling off my rock, paper, scissors, 2nd place New South Wales trophy is a prize that you can get. A lot of my things, like even if it's just like something really cool that I found at a truck stop in Des Moines, Iowa that I've had for like 8 years, but I think you'll like it. That's going to be part of the prizes too. But there's also going to be a digital file that you're going to get that's going to have a bunch of ebooks. So everybody gets something who buys a raffle ticket, but the raffle ticket is a fundraiser for the moving of, and really the creation of, because I kind of feel like the Know Thyself podcast is moving, we're trying to relocate it to Costa Rica, but in that aspect, transform it from the Know Thyself podcast to the Know Thyself network. And we've got plans of having, other kind of programs on here, more video programs. We want to do like a 1980s weekly news report where we do like the astrological weather, and we'll do esoteric headlines, and we're going to build a little set and everything and wear like 80s clothes. It's going to be such a fun time of shenanigans. But the main goal is to get Know Thyself network, a 24/7 esoteric occult network that's just pumping out truth, unity, and the expansion of consciousness. Because how many people do we know in this network? Like, I know somebody who could just I could call right now and be like, oh, I'll go on for 30 minutes and talk about, my gardening practice and how I garden here in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And then somebody else would be like, yeah, I'm like the coolest yoga teacher in the world. I'll show you some sweet downward dog. You're like, this is amazing. So it's coming, it's building. So we'll be excited about this fundraiser, because it's like, I'm not really worried about it. I just can't take these books with me. And a lot of them we have digital copies of. So I would love to share, because I have been kind of a book gypsy for these last 7 years. So I have had some kind of fun collections. Most of them will have my handwritten notes in there. And you can tell it's my handwritten notes because like the underlining cuts into the word, and it's really like, was this guy in a trampoline when he was underlining things? It's like, no, that's just Daniel. He's excited when he reads about the occult and he can't handle himself. But but most of the stuff will have like personal notes from us. It's just going to be a really fun time. I'm like so excited for the ball. So we will keep you updated on that.
Absolutely. And then as the season comes to its end, or comes to an end as far as the second season, and it's not, obviously we're not there yet. Before we prepare the third season, we're also going to make a list between season 2 and 3. I think we should have a series that is only dedicated to about 30 minutes to an hour with individuals who continuously reach out to us and say, hey, when can I come onto the podcast and have a conversation? Or when can you interview this person that they've actually suggested to us? And we thought about having it in between the podcasts, and that's a great idea. But I think while we prepare the third season, we'll be having some interesting individuals come on and give their perspective on how they've either found us or how there's a common language there between the two of us. So it'll be excited to you guys can kind of witness the expansion of what we're doing and how we want to do it. Because I mean, what else do we have to lose right now? You know,
right? We ain't losing our souls.
Nope. Nobody's taking that away from me. But yeah, we'll talk about that towards the end of this Bible session. And anything else you want to add to it?
I don't think so. I mean, just a big shout out to everybody.
And the Patreon Ninjas. Thank you so much.
Everybody. We're just so grateful, so blessed to be on this journey with you. Just so happy.
Cool, man. Well, until next time then.
Until next time.